Hello, this is Megan, and today I will be playing around with my new set of Rachel Beth watercolors in Winter Garden, which is a series of muted pinks and greens. I'm using my B watercolor paper, which was one of the few papers I could find at Michael's that I actually really liked, and I'm using this photo of a pelican that I took when I was at the aviary for my birthday. First things first, let's get that sketch down. I sped this up because the focus of this video will be the watercolor itself, but I still like to show my full process. After the sketch is done, I move on to inking. I use India ink for both the inked lines and the ink wash, which is just ink with water added. You can use this a lot like watercolor, but it is more permanent. But the nice thing about India ink is that you can continue to layer it, and you can also mix it with watercolors to create tinted tones. It's very easy to layer other media on top of it. I like that because I can go back and forth and I don't feel like it's a one-way process. It's important to make sure that your ink is completely dry before you try to layer anything, or before you try to erase any pencil. I have a small hairdryer that I use to dry layers in between. I set it on low if I'm patient and high if I am not. If you don't wait, you will get muddy colors, which is another way to say that something is very overworked. And on top of that, you may end up disturbing the fibers of the paper, so they'll break off in small chunks and mix in with your paint. And here we have the actual watercolors. They are sealed in a little plastic bag. Let's pop that out of there and let's take a look at these colors. We have a small button sample of dill pickles, which technically I'm going to use because it came in the package. Moving on and opening this up, we have a rich green called Sweet Box. We have a very pastel lavender called Winter Daphne. We have a slightly darker gray purple called Lenten Rose. And we have a cooler blue-green called Juniper Berries. Let's clean up and move along. Okay, here is our inked and very dry painting base, which could be an illustration on its own, but I think it could use a pop of color. These handmade watercolors, and I have used a set of these Rachel Beth watercolors before, are not fully transparent. I like how they handle, but they have a little bit of a gouache quality to them. They still play by the rules of watercolors, which means that you want to fully dry things before you layer unless you intend to blend the paint. With India ink, when it is not diluted down to being a wash, it'll sit on top of other colors. When you add water to make it a wash, you can use it to tint things with a gray layer, almost like a sheer piece of fabric. But if you add too much when everything is wet, that's when we're back to the mud. And we do not want to be in the mud. At this point, we're going to do two things. One, we're going to cheat a little because I actually really love this sample color of dill pickle, and it looks a lot like the color of water that's behind the pelican. Granted, I did not define any real rules for this aside from that I would use the paint that came in this package. Secondly, as you may have noticed, I am speeding this up a little bit. Even so, you can see the way that the paint is layering on top of the India ink. One of the reasons I love India ink is the way that colors blend with it. The reason that I did the India ink underpainting first is because the ink provides a layer of tone that I can paint over. I can then add India ink back in to add more depth to the painting. This is a good time to talk about paper and materials quality in general. I know that you can pick up very inexpensive art supplies just about anywhere, but having good paper really helps. That's why I try to look for paper that have at least some cotton content if possible. You're going to want at least 140-pound watercolor paper, and that's the paper weight, in order to have a good result. I realize that 90-pound papers are out there, but they are very difficult to work with, and when they are very cheap and you're pairing it with cheap paint, you're really missing out. It is worth the money to at least buy some of the staples of a solid art material collection. At the very least, pick your primaries and go from there. While there is something to be said for a limited palette like this, I wasn't able to make it work with just this palette. I chose a picture that had a couple more pops of color than the Winter Garden set would allow for, so I did dig back into my incredibly expansive collection of watercolors that I've been hoarding for years. One of the nice things about these handmade watercolor sets are that you will get colors that you would not normally find in a store. I can't tell you how many of the same color I've ended up with because I didn't keep track of my, I'm not going to call it hoard, but hoard adjacent collection of art supplies. Sometimes when you see the same colors over and over again unblended, you start to just recognize them. So I do feel that these are worthwhile to purchase if just for the uniqueness of the colors involved. Obviously, I like these watercolors. This is the second set that I've bought from this maker. I love the packaging. I love the size of the pans. I love the names of the colors. It's just a really neat item that makes art a little bit more fun. The price on this was $28, and I find that to be worth it because high quality watercolor does cost a decent amount of money, but you have to remember that it's going to last you more than one session. So you're probably, unless you're doing an absolutely enormous painting, not going to use up a half pan of watercolor in one session. And here he is, all done. I'm pretty happy with this piece, and it's up for sale. If anyone is interested, you can contact me through my website at meganmerz.com or through Instagram if you're so inclined. If you want to see more of my work, please go to meganmerz.com or my Instagram, which can be found at megan.merz. I hope to be making more videos soon since I genuinely enjoy it, and I hope that you do too. Bye!